Hi, I'm Alex. Today we have Patrick Lee. He's a serial entrepreneur, advisor, and investor. You might know him as the CEO of a site called Rotten Tomatoes. Welcome.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me how you started Rotten Tomatoes?
Sure. Before Rotten Tomatoes, I had a design firm. We were doing a lot of work for the entertainment industry, companies like Disney, ABC, Warner Brothers, Artisan Entertainment, MTV, VH1. And our creative director, Sen Duong, he actually was the one who came up with the idea for Rotten Tomatoes. Basically, he was a huge Jackie Chan fan. He wanted to know what everyone was saying about a movie called Rush Hour that was coming out. And his idea was, back in the day, you open up a newspaper, you see a movie poster with quotes all over it. But those quotes would always be good, regardless if the movie was good or not. If the movie was good, the quotes would be from professional critics like Roger Ebert. If the movie was bad, it would be from, random radio station DJs and stuff like that. So Sen's idea was essentially, what if he has all the quotes, good and bad, but only from professional critics? And then to gather them all in one place, put a score on it. So that's what he did. It took him 2 weeks to go from an idea to actually putting something out. He built it in static HTML and launched it, and it started getting noticed like almost right away. He ran it as a hobby for about a year. We were hosting it for him. And after about a year, we approached him and we said, you know what, maybe we should do this as a business. So he agreed. I went out, raised $1 million in funding for it, and we transfer our whole design firm over, 25 people to work on it, and we gave the design firm off to another group to take over. Unfortunately, right after that, things got kind of crazy, so we had to let go of people and things like that. But that's how Rotten Tomatoes started.
Yeah, I know that you guys have a tomato meter score. Can you tell me more about how that works?
Sure. So the idea is, for every movie, you'll have a bunch of reviews from professional critics. And for every review, if the critic recommends seeing the movie, then it will be a fresh tomato from that critic. And if they don't recommend it, it'll be a rotten tomato. And then we take the percentage of critics that recommend seeing the movie to give you the tomato meter score. So if half the critics say go see it and half the critics say don't go see it, it would have a 50%. And for us, anything 60% or above, which is a majority, a super majority, we would consider to be fresh. And if it's 75% or above, meaning at least 3 out of 4 critics recommend seeing the movie, it's considered certified fresh, which is like it's very safe that you'll probably like it.
Do you have any favorite movies you recommend that you've been watching during this quarantine?
I would say these days I've been watching more um, more TV. I've been watching a lot of anime because I'm just a big, anime nerd, comic book nerd, and all that. But one show I saw recently was called The Queen's Gambit on Netflix that I liked a lot. Gambit is very anime-like. It's about chess, but if it follows a lot of the same anime tropes of like, oh, there's this person and she's like a super genius at chess, and she ends up having to go against different, almost like bosses and stuff like that. So I don't want to give away too much, but it actually resembles anime a lot.
In terms of working with Hollywood studios, what was your experience?
Right. So with Hollywood studios, I mean, we didn't work with them directly, but sometimes we would get marketing campaigns from them. So they would buy ads with us. And it was tricky because I would say we have a love-hate relationship with studios because they love us when the movie comes out fresh and they hate us when it comes out rotten. And when they bought ad campaigns with us, it was before the movie actually came out. So we didn't know what the score was. And to be honest, we were always hoping that when they bought an ad campaign, we're like, please be fresh because our lives would be a lot easier. But if it was rotten, the studios would call us and they would be complaining, sometimes threatening, and they would try to change the score. But we knew we're like, we cannot change the score. But they would go out, they would try and find other positive reviews that we missed, but generally those were always from folks that weren't actual real critics. Or they would go through, they would read all the negative reviews to try and find ones that they're like, no, this is actually positive. And in some rare cases, we would go and reread it and we're like, okay, that actually could be positive. And we go and double check with the critic. And then they would say, oh yeah, that's supposed to be, fresh or rotten. So that was kind of our relationship with studios. When we first started and we were talking to studios about, buying ads or things like that, I remember they would just like laugh at us when they heard the name. They're like, what kind of name is that? But it's kind of cool that 20 years later, I'm pretty sure every studio's heard of us.
Yeah, a lot of my friends use Rotten Tomatoes to this day. Like that's their go-to when looking for movie reviews.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it possible for studios to pay critics for positive reviews?
We don't control the critics, so it's up to each critic. But if they're a professional critic, and if it ever came out that they were bought off by a studio, I mean, very likely they would be ostracized. They'd also possibly lose their jobs. And I think there have been times where studios would try to like almost like wine and dine, or like give lots of favors to some critic to try to get a better review from them. Yeah, and that's, again, that's up to the studios and the critics. I think studios would try it. I don't know how effective it's been. What they typically would do with someone like Rotten Tomatoes is if they know a movie is going to be bad before they put it out, what you'll see is the studios will not screen the movie in advance for critics. So they won't allow any critics to see it. They'll do an embargo, and they won't allow critics to post a review until the movie comes out. And then when the movie comes out, then all the critics will, put the reviews out, and it'll generally be, if it's not screened for critics, it's almost guaranteed to be super like rotten, probably 30% or lower tomato meter score. So that's one thing. I've sometimes also seen studios where they will selectively screen the movie for critics. So they'll try to screen it for critics that are more likely to give them a good score. I'm pretty sure that happened like a couple years ago with Ghost in the Shell, where the movie came out and the score was, I think, in the 60s or so, and it was actually fresh. But then the day of, it dropped like a brick, because that's when all the other critics started actually putting the reviews in, and it dropped quite a lot, which is pretty rare. But my guess is maybe they were like selectively screening for favorable critics early to try to have a higher score in the beginning.
I really hate live action adaptations.
Yeah, I think it works better when it's anime-like, but it's not necessarily based on anime, because I think it's really hard to translate a lot of those characters into human form. But like, I don't know, like something like Pacific Rim, I think was basically an anime. I mean, it's giant robots versus giant, like, kaiju monsters, like Godzilla type creatures. And I think that they did all right. But I don't think that was based on a specific anime. Or The Edge of Tomorrow, the one with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, that was based on a manga type story. But they did it in a way where it was the same story, but it was obviously not like, the anime type characters. And it was not a property that like an average person, I had never heard of it until the movie came out. And then when I started reading into it, I was like, oh, wow, it's actually based on a manga that I've never heard of. But I think in that situation, it kind of worked because people didn't already have like preconceived notions of who the characters are supposed to be and everything.
In terms of advertising for movies, are they spending like millions of dollars to promote these movies? How does that work?
I'm not as sure these days, but back when people actually watch movies in theaters, pre-COVID, yeah, I mean, the summer blockbuster movies, they had to have huge budgets, huge marketing budgets, and buying TV spots, a lot of times during big events, like, I don't know, like NBA finals or even the Super Bowl and stuff like that. So definitely these days, because of COVID, like, people don't go to theaters as much. Like, the drop off is like massive. And you'll see companies like Disney and HBO, and they're trying to all figure out like, how do we make that money back for these big budget movies. And they're experimenting, like Disney with Mulan. They were like, you have to be subscriber to Disney Plus, and you have to pay another, I think it was like $30 on top of that in order to actually watch Mulan. It's tricky, and I think that will definitely affect the marketing. Plus, the other thing I would say nowadays is because everyone's stuck at home because of COVID, they're watching just a ton more stuff, and they're watching a ton of streaming, so they're not getting commercials. So it's like, how are you reaching them these days as a studio?
That's true. Yeah, COVID has accelerated like digital media and content, especially like Netflix, HBO. Like, where do you see the future of like entertainment?
It's made a huge jump towards digital, towards watching at home. For a while it was dominated by Netflix, but now there's Disney Plus. HBO is getting super aggressive. You had the other players like Hulu, Apple, Amazon Studios, and so I think what's happening is basically these streaming services are turning into like the new cable. television, and I think a lot of people are subscribed to more than one service. And so one thing that's going to happen is, when you have so much choice, unlimited choice, then making decisions is more important than ever. Rotten Tomatoes and other services are trying to help with that. So I think that's definitely one thing. I think because of streaming services, television is actually getting much, much bigger. Um, People still make movies and stuff, but I think when you're used to watching at home, you're watching normally in smaller chunks than a full length movie of 2 or 3 hours. You're watching 30-minute, or I guess like 20-minute to 40-minute like um, television shows instead. And so a lot of the stuff you typically will hear of that break out are things like, I don't know, The Boys or Stranger Things or Umbrella Academy or Queen's Gambit, and those are all TV shows.
Short form content is like better because people can binge watch it all at once.
Right.
So you're like a journey as an entrepreneur. You founded multiple startups. Can you share more about some of your past experiences?
Sure. I've done 6 different startups. Rotten Tomatoes was the third. The first company was just selling computer system components and didn't go anywhere. Second company was the web design for the entertainment industry. And the fourth after Rotten Tomatoes was in China. We were trying to do sort of like a Yelp over there, but we actually had it was overcomplicated. We had like a card reader loyalty program. People actually had physical cards that they went into merchants and tried to swipe it and everything. After that, I went to Hong Kong. I was doing a company called Alive Not Dead. We were essentially like trying to be like a MySpace for Asia, a site that worked with celebrities and artists to connect to each other and to their fans. And then when I came back to the Bay Area, I was doing a mobile gaming company. We were making a synchronous multiplayer role-playing game for mobile. And most of these, of these 6 companies, 4 of them were kind of at the intersection of tech and entertainment. That's a space I've always been interested in. And also I was always kind of interested in doing my own thing. All 6 companies I did with at least one friend who was a co-founder. At least one of my co-founders was a friend that I knew from freshman year of college. And multiple of these companies I've done with different friends. At least 4 friends I've done 2 or more companies with.
In one of your podcasts, I heard that you like doing cool things with friends.
Yeah. So that was always my main motivation. These days, I would say I've been more reluctant to do enough startups because I know the time and energy it takes. But if I did anything, or it would probably still be with friends, and it would probably still be around the intersection of tech and entertainment.
I think one of the coolest things that you do that most people don't know about is Gold House.
Yeah, sure. So Gold House is like a bunch of, I guess, prominent Asians around tech and entertainment and venture that got together to try to help promote Asian Americans in the States. One of the ways they've been doing it is through Gold Open. Gold Open is essentially they would find high quality movies and sometimes television that were made with Asians in it. And whether it's the talent acting, the directing, the writers, producers, etc. And they would try to really push as much as possible to get people to support those movies or television shows. And so one of the really early ones they did was around Crazy Rich Asians, where they essentially got a lot of tech and venture people to basically buy out theaters, and they would work with Asian American celebrities to promote that fact. So they would kind of like pair up tech people with these Asian American celebrities, and they would use the celebrities like social media presence to kind of blast it, and they would like give away tickets or other things, or people would buy it and invite their friends and coworkers and other things to go watch. And then they would try and pay it forward. So instead of like, oh, you don't have to pay me back for that ticket, go out and buy tickets for other people and get them to watch it. And so they did that. And, opening weekend for Crazy Rich Asians was double all the box office estimates. And they did it for a lot of other great films like, Searching. They were supporting Parasite, um, and just lots of good stuff out there. They did like Always Be My Maybe. So I think it's been really helpful because one thing with that I think is really important is for Asians, um, they really want to be able to see like they need to see themselves in the media. They need to see themselves because that's how they think of themselves and how others think about us. So having like positive representation in media is really important, and that's one thing that Gold Open and Gold House is trying to change.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Going off from that, like, why is there a lack of Asians in movies? Are there not enough Asian producers, directors, writers, and investors to finance like Asian American, Asian Pacific stories?
Based on my observations, it's two things, but really it's one thing. It's money. Um, I don't necessarily think like Hollywood is racist or whatever. I mean, maybe some individuals are, but not as a whole. I think it's really they're gonna go where the money is. And so when they saw that Crazy Rich Asians made money, a lot of folks in Hollywood were like, give us TV shows, give us movies that are like Crazy Rich Asians because they want to make, end of the day, they want to make money. They want a successful show. They want a successful movie. I think one thing with a lot of Asians, um, you see a lot of Asian filmmakers, they just want to tell their story, which I think is super important. But a lot of times these stories, they're low budget and they're not designed to be commercial. Um, they're designed to just share an Asian American like identity story or something. And the problem with that is when it comes out, it doesn't make money. It's not designed to make money. And so what happens is then Hollywood associate that and they'll say, look at these movies, they don't make any money, and so they're not going to want to do more. And what I think is really important is for Asians to make movies, with Asians that are designed to make money. You know, things like Searching, things like Crazy Rich Asians, things like Parasite. I think that's how you change. You need hit shows, you need hit movies, and ideally, I think uh, if we can prove, like we did using Gold Open, that we can actually get Asians to support these films, that these films can make money, like there's going to be a lot more of them being made. And look these days, right, with Mulan, with Shang-Chi. I mean, these are going to be Mulan and Shang-Chi are like two of the highest budget films ever, with a primarily like Asian American cast.
Yeah, I'm excited to see more Asian representation in Hollywood for sure. Are there any current projects that you're working on?
Right now, I'm just more researching. I just moved to Taiwan. I plan to stay here for like probably like 3 months or so to kind of explore. And I'm thinking about things within, the intersection of tech and entertainment primarily. I've considered looking into the possibility of starting a fund to invest in that space. So right now I'm just more exploring.
Can you talk about
and
some
see
of
what
your like
opportunities there are.
investments that you've made in the past? I know you invested in like some films.
I wouldn't say I'm a very active investor. I've done much more like mentoring and advising. So advise a number of different startups. A lot of them are typically in the consumer space, and mentored at a lot of different programs, do a lot of speaking around like startups, especially at the early stage. So I do a lot of that, and it's something I enjoy. I definitely like working with startups. I like the energy of that.
What's some of the best advice you can give to like budding entrepreneurs?
I think the number one piece of advice I would give to someone who's thinking about doing a startup is to focus. I do a talk around this that you can, I think if you go on YouTube, you can probably find it. And the reason why is because entrepreneurs, they believe that they can do anything. That's part of why they have that confidence to go out and do a startup. But the problem is when they think they can do anything, they end up wanting to do everything. And they just try to do too much too early, right? And it's death. Like if you bite off more than you can chew, it's not going to end well. And they'll end up having too many features, or they're covering too many categories, or they're covering a too large of a market. And it almost doesn't matter how much money you start with. Like you can't boil the ocean without like I don't know, dropping a nuke in it maybe, or like pulling us closer to the sun. But generally, like it doesn't matter how many resources you have, you can't do that. And look recently at like Quibi, they raised almost $2 billion, and they came out the gate with so many shows and spending all this money, but I don't think they ever quite figured out like a model that made sense. And they probably could have done that by being a lot more focused early and testing things before going kind of all in on it. And you see this all the time, and it happens with so many startups, and it's, I think, the number one reason why startups will die. So the thing I say over and over and over again is like, be crazy super focused with your business. I mean, look at Rotten Tomatoes. We were a site for movie reviews, right? Think about anything, any company you can think of, go back to the beginning, look at the early days for those companies and see how focused they were. Amazon was just books. Facebook was just Harvard. eBay was just Beanie Babies. Google was just search, right? Look at every fast food restaurant franchise. They're all one thing, right? And so that would be the main advice I would give to any starting founder.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Focus is really hard because I feel like I have shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, what will happen is, especially if you're working with any kind of users or clients, they're going to be like, hey, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And you're like, yes, yes, yes. And after you've done that like 10 times, you just had this weird, bloated, inefficient product that you can't even like maintain because you're just doing way too much.
Yeah, I think Taiwan is a very interesting place. Like in terms of entertainment and media, because there are a lot of Asian Americans who go to Taiwan and become celebrities, like Wilbur Pan and
Like Wong Leehom.
Yeah, Wong Leehom, yeah. And I also have a classmate from UCSD, Sam Lin. He's a musician. He's doing a lot of music stuff over there too. Do you see Taiwan being more of a global hub for for music and movies and dramas in the next like 5-10 years on a global scale?
I think they've done quite well with the music side, like with the folks you mentioned, with like Jay Chou and folks like that. Movies, not so much. Hong Kong in the 90s was quite good about getting their movies out to the rest of the world, the Chow Yun-fat and Jackie Chan and those kinds of folks. More recently, I would say on the music scene, like Korea has done a great job with K-pop, with Blackpink and BTS. And then Japan's done a great job with anime and with video games. Taiwan, music is not bad, but I think they have had more challenges doing it and getting things out there. I feel like they've been most successful with music, but not at the level of like Korea.
There's not much to do during quarantine besides watch shows or create content. See TikTok as a threat to other social media platforms?
I don't use TikTok myself. I think I'm too old for that. But what I've seen in general with when you talk about things that appeal to teenagers, is they can get popular really fast, but they can die really fast. So, you've seen it time and time again with any kind of like product or service or whatever. There's always the thing with teenagers is they're going to grow up, and when they grow up, like, can that product go with them or not? And if it doesn't, the new group of teenagers coming in, it might not be cool anymore. They're gonna be like, oh, that's old, and that's not cool. And you saw that with things like MySpace, where MySpace grew like super fast, but there's a point when it just wasn't cool anymore, and people start moving to things like Snapchat or Instagram, right? And so it's very dangerous. The companies that have done a good job, where they're still around, is when it might start with teenagers, but it's or young, maybe college students, high school students, but it grows with them. And once it gets to a point, if it can survive to a point where you get to adults, or especially if you can get to like grandparents and stuff like that, like older folks don't switch as much. There's literally still people out there with like AOL and Hotmail email addresses, right? Like super old school. Once they find something, they just stick with it. But I think with the younger folks, they change all the time. They're going to grow out of it. And how do you stay cool and stay relevant? It's a very tough battle. And so I feel like with things like TikTok or Snapchat, it's tough because they're constantly gonna have to stay on the edge and be cool.
What advice would you give to a creator who wants to pitch to Netflix?
I mean, pitching to Netflix, I think, is generally not easy, but I would say if it was a creator, let's say making something for like YouTube, my recommendation is the same as what I was saying about for founders is be super focused. Make something very specific, not generalist. Like, don't be like, hey, here's a show and we talk about cooking and we talk about like finance and we talk about books. Like people are gonna be like, what is this show? But instead be like really focused. You might be like, we're only doing cooking, or we're only doing cooking of this type of cuisine. Like we're only doing Chinese food, or we're only doing desserts, and just make that the thing and be the more specific, the better. Uh, Try and find some kind of hook that people hear it and they're like, oh, that sounds cool. Oh, you know, they're cooking, you know, desserts only, but it's this kind of person or whatever, or they're doing it in this way. Like, oh, we're doing desserts only, but we're doing it where it's like you can make them for under $10 for your ingredients or something like that. And I think the more specific you make it, the easier it is for people to understand what it is. The easier it is to market because you know exactly who you're targeting when you make it very, very specific. So I think the rules that I mentioned around being focused for a founder, I think they still apply for a creator.
In startup world, you have to create an MVP. Like in the entertainment world, you have to create a pilot episode, right?
I would say actually the MVP is the script, or maybe even the treatment. Like even the the 3-page, like here's a summary of the idea. But a good MVP would be like if you could actually write a script, you can run around with that. You don't actually have to go and film anything, and you can get interest based purely around the script. Yeah, I mean primarily people are going around with scripts, and then the scripts get greenlit to then get funding to go and make a pilot.
Like, have you heard of Wall Street Bets? It's a group of online day traders where they literally gamble money on like options, like out of money calls, and they just gamble away their life savings. I think that would be a very entertaining, interesting show.
Yeah, I mean, again, that sounds very focused to me. So I could see that could be an interesting show. And one thing you could try and do, again, especially if you've never done it before, to go and pitch to Netflix or something is not easy. But this is the kind of thing that you could totally go and make a YouTube channel around and make videos around it, and then see if it works. And you can experiment with like the host, you can experiment with the time, like the length, all these other things, and see if you find an audience and continue to improve it. And the top like folks on YouTube, they make a lot of money. They make millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, they do. I feel like the best business model nowadays is to build an audience and then sell to them.
Yeah, if you can get a loyal audience on a YouTube, a Twitch, or any of those things, I mean, it's quite powerful, and especially if you can do it across multiple platforms.
Do you think it's better to build a startup or build a business around YouTube?
I think it really depends on what you're interested in. Is if you're interested in creating content and things and you want to be more of a solo person or a small team, then I think it's better to be a creator if you want to create. If you actually like something like doing a startup, you might be more focused on building a platform or something like that, and more focused on the business side. So it really depends on your interest. But I would say for the most part, most of the creators and versus founders are kind of different people and different personalities.
How do you see VR influencing the content creation space?
I've seen some of it. I think it's really interesting. The biggest challenge with VR is there just aren't enough folks using it. So, and there's across many different types of VR devices. So it's hard as a creator to spend the time and effort to make it, where you can reach enough audience to, at least make back the money and time you put in. And I would say in general, it's harder to make VR than it is to, make a YouTube video or have a TikTok, channel, or Instagram or Twitter, right? Those are much, much lower bars of entry to creating content. VR content is something I think is very, very high bar, with a smaller audience. So it's tough, but at the same time, I think VR is super cool if we could ever get to a point of like, a world with like Ready Player One, I would love it. But I think it's going to be a big challenge to get enough devices out there and to get the quality of content. And the thing is, it's a chicken egg problem, because if you have a lot of devices, you'll get content. But right now we don't have enough devices out there, and we don't have enough quality content out there.
That's a pretty tough challenge to solve. Do you see the future being like Ready Player One and like post-apocalyptic world where everyone just lives in the virtual reality world?
Well, I mean, COVID brought us one step closer to that, right? Because it used to be majority of people are working, in person, like physically in the same space and everything. And now, because of COVID, we've been forced much more into working virtually, and things like Zoom and all that kind of stuff became much bigger. Tons of startups, innovation around the space, because a lot of things have changed. The way even people think about retail, travel, hospitality, food is all changing. So wherever we were before, we probably got like a decade, 10-year push because of COVID towards that Ready Player One type of world.
It's been a crazy year.
Yeah, it's crazy year. It seems to just keep getting crazier. Can't wait for 2020 to be over, and hopefully we can move forward, more positively in the future and more safely.
The Gold House also has an incubator program.
They have one called Gold Rush.
Oh, Gold Rush,
Gold Rush is for founders, mostly product focused founders, but I don't think it has to be. And they run this program. I think this is the third batch that just wrapped up, and so they've been running it for over a year now. And they go out there, they try and bring founders, try and bring in a lot of like mentors to help support these founders, and then they also try and push a Gold Rush sale towards the end of the program, where they get a lot of like celebrities and other folks to help spread the word to help these founders with bringing in early revenue.
It sounds like a pretty good program. But yeah, what are the like requirements to join that program?
Every batch, before the batch, they'll send out a call for applications. I believe at least one founder needs to be Asian, and then they select a number of them. I want to say it's roughly around 15-ish or so companies. Or I think it's between 10 to 20. And yeah, and then the program is, I believe it's a 3-month program.
During the program, do startup founders go through training modules?
So I was only serving as a mentor. Every mentor ended up getting assigned to one startup that they did, call every few weeks with, to give feedback and advice. And then I believe all or most of the mentors also participated in different like panels or different sessions with the startup. So I think every week there was some programming. I just did my panel earlier today.
Yeah, I have a friend, Maria, who's in it from Blackwood.
Yeah, she was at the event today and asked one of the questions.
Oh yeah, shout out to Blackwood for men. If you want like men facial products, premium men facial products made in Japan, you can go check them out.
It sounds really cool.
Yeah,
definitely want to try it out.
Let's say people want to support Gold House. How can people join?
If you go to the Gold House site, goldhouse.org, you can get on there. I think if you click on join the movement, you can actually sign up for a newsletter that will have information on, gold opens, on the Gold Rush sales, things like that. So people can sign up, follow it, and then when they'll constantly, have different newsletters and things that will come out on ways to support Gold House and the programs that they're running.
Yeah, that's awesome. So everyone go check out Gold House. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, definitely go check it out.
Thanks. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter. My handle with all of them is Rotten Doubt, Rotten from Rotten Tomatoes and Doubt from No Doubt. So just look for Rotten Doubt and you'll find me, and you can reach out to me there.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.